Hello and welcome everyone to this episode of DoubleDM podcast, episode 125 of the show. And damn, that's incredible.
125 episodes. Fucking hell.
I mean, think about it this way. We've been at this for we've been at this for 2.5 years. And that fact is surreal as fuck.
Yeah, every time I see the episode number or hear about it, it's just wow. You know, you get me?
Yeah, 125 episodes of discussing TTRPGs in varying complexity, which is fun because today's episode is about complexity and simplicity and what's better and if you should do the complex thing or the simple thing with your players. Should you make your puzzles more complicated, more simple, and all of that stuff. That was perfectly planned by us, obviously.
Obviously, as everything is.
Yeah.
All the time.
You never know how much thought goes into what comes when. Yeah.
Anyways. It has been a journey.
It has been.
Quite an amazing one at that.
Yeah.
I gotta say that.
Gotta be very honest, when we made the 100, I already said I didn't think we would get that far.
Yeah.
125 is 25 weeks later, basically. Actually, I don't know, it seems that we are never able to run out of topics. But at the same time, I'm still thinking to myself, we've done so many episodes, at some point we have to run out of topics to talk about. But then again, we also could get guests on the show. We could do kind of specials, right? We've been planning a few specials that wouldn't be necessarily normal DoubleDM episodes, but maybe would be fun for people to listen to. And yeah, I think that especially also when the actual plays finally come out, which they will at some point, we just have so much stuff that we can put out there, and it's amazing, but also kind of frightening when you think about it, that holy shit, there's so much stuff of us out there.
Yeah, and I mean, if you think about it, every episode is roughly about an hour, something along those lines.
Our average episode length is 58 minutes, by the way.
Yeah, so just let's go with that hour. We have 125 hours of stuff out there for people to listen to. What the fuck?
With 2 Wire World Matters, a few other things like bonus episodes, I think we're very close. We're at 130, 132 or something hours produced of content for this show. When we get to 168, which is the amount of hours in a week, that is just thinking about that as a surreal fact. When DoubleDM releases episode 155 or 150, there's gonna be enough content of this show to listen to this whole show on repeat for a whole freaking week.
Yeah.
Just let that sink in. That's surreal. And it's so hard to grasp how much stuff that is. And I mean, there are people that have listened to every single episode of this show.
Yes, yeah.
I cannot understand how.
It's just a lot to take in.
It's a lot to take in.
Every week, again and again, when you think about how much stuff we've already done. But it's kind of an amazing feeling, but still weird AF. If you know, I don't know how to say what I want to say, but I think you get me, right?
Yeah, but also I feel at the same time, nothing has changed since uploading episode 20 for me. Sure, the show became a whole lot better and it became a really good show in my opinion at this point. But the feeling of, damn, I still can upload this podcast with one of my closest friends hasn't changed since in my head it switched from, okay, yeah, we're starting this to, okay, yeah, we're actually doing it. At the beginning it was, okay, damn, we've put out episode 1 and 2. Now I have to do 3. Nowadays, I'm not thinking about the next episode. I'm just thinking, damn.
Yeah,
damn.
Exactly. Wow. Anyways, what happened in your last week?
Nothing.
Exams
are coming up, or exams are happening tomorrow for me when we're recording. When this comes out, I've already finished that exam. And yeah, my week has been since Monday only focusing on that. Because I cannot allow myself not to pass. And yeah, I haven't done anything of note really. I've been trying to sleep through the anxiety, and yeah, I've got sessions coming up though in TTRPGs at least. One of them actually today, because after like 6 p.m. on a Thursday for the exam on Friday, I'm just not going to be able to learn anything new anyway. So why not try to have fun at least a bit?
Just relax and unwind.
Yeah. So yeah, the exam is on Friday, and yeah, I only got cool stuff coming up. But first, before I get into that, Niels, how was your week?
My week was pretty uneventful in itself as well, except last Friday, I had my last appointment of my physics lab, so I'm done for this semester. Looking at x-rays and shit, x-raying different items that were on me at the time, and just then trying to describe why they were seen that way. Wow, what a complicated thing to do.
Wow.
Right? Anyways, that was my Friday. And then on Tuesday, I had an amazing session in TTRPGs right after one of the big boss fights with one of the minor villains. They just headed back from their fight towards their home base, you could say, in the main city of this island, just to gather up some information and just relax a bit and have a great time, because that fight was tough, was kind of close. They managed to closely get that motherfucker before he escaped. So that was a nail biter, and now we're just coming into the relaxation phase. And in the city, there is a street food festival and music festival coming up for the next couple of weeks, where they can just go around, eat a whole bunch of different foods, listen to different music, and just enjoy their life, basically. Yeah, last session, we just, right before the street food festival started, right on the day before that, they were just talking to different people in the city, gathering up some items that they want to buy, seeing if anybody needs help or if they want to help someone who needs help, and just opening up their own tavern, or trying to, and some advertisement for that. And yeah, and can't wait for them to experience all the fun fair games that I've prepared, or I hope they are fun. But yeah, that will be seen on the next Tuesday, I guess.
Yeah, interesting. I also can't wait for next Tuesday, because then that's when we have another Tyranny of Dragons session, and my players are probably only gonna travel, or are traveling somewhere. I still don't know where they want to travel, but they will be traveling on a dragon's back, on a silver dragon's back, to be exact. Well, at least when they get to convince her that they are allowed to bring another person that she doesn't know.
Okay, well... Okay.
So there's going to be a lot of interesting stuff happening, a lot of interesting discussions probably before, and then we will have to see if they can convince a dragon to let a stranger ride them. So yeah, we will see that. I also have a session coming up today where we've been apparently deceived.
Okay.
Or at least we think so, because we were sent a long time ago, like 10 sessions ago or something, or 8 sessions ago or something, to find something that can be described as basically the key to turn the 13th evil god of this world's pantheon into a good one. To convince this evil god that his ways are wrong and that he should turn to the good side.
Okay.
We don't believe that thing would have actually worked in the first place. But we said, okay, yeah, sure, we get that thing. Because it was part of our mission anyway. Or at least it was somewhat part of our mission anyway. We get the thing, we bring it back, and there are more and more moments where we realize something is happening. People have been gone. People have been missing. Not just from the village where we started off, where we were tasked, but also from the way there.
Okay.
Because what we know is that a demon, and this is one of my favorite monster designs ever, by the way. This demon is a hunter, and it's the ultimate hunter because it's a demon. It was designed for only one thing. This demon is invisible to everyone but their prey.
Oh, damn.
You cannot see this demon. It is impossible to see this demon without being its own target. That's just fucking amazing.
This
demon has been abducting people. That's what we know. And it seems that the people abducted were brought to the same village where we were tasked by the priests of this town or of the city or of this village to do some weird blood ritual with them.
Oh, okay.
And we're thinking that they would need 13 people for that ritual. And we somehow think that when we magically looked at this crystal, at this key that they needed, it seemed that this was not a good device, but a bad device. And I don't think that it's actually a key to make him good, but more of a key to freeing him, which would be bad.
Oh, no, really? Would it?
Not necessarily free, but do something. Maybe make him, I don't know, a god of demons or something bad.
Just more power to an evil god.
To an evil entity, yeah.
That's always fun to experience, right?
So one of the fun things is in this group, we are pretty much overpowered. We're fucking strong. That's because the game isn't designed for the length of campaign we had, or it just doesn't account for people playing so much and so long that we've just broken the boundaries of the game. And our GM was kind of scared. To be fair, yes, it nearly got to that we just turn around when we find out that people are missing from this village, and there are a lot of people missing, that we just turn around to the temple and say, yeah, we're gonna slaughter everyone, because every evil cultist deserves to die, basically. Now, thinking about that, maybe that's not necessarily true, but nothing could have stopped us when we just said, okay, no, we want to barge in there and stop this shit, because we're that overpowered.
Yeah.
It was like when you have a level 15 D&D party fight a bunch of bandits. It's not fun.
Yeah.
For the in-game characters, this means nothing.
Yeah, just a mild inconvenience.
And I mean, the thing is, there are still enough ways for our GM to challenge us, and he does so every single time. But sometimes it's also, you're simple villagers wanting to take us prisoner. I want to let you know that we've slain a dragon without taking a single hit point damage. Think about that before you attack us. We are dragon slayers. We don't care what you say.
Yeah.
And it got to the point where we are kind of cocky as players a bit, as characters as well.
I mean, that's just natural.
We know we can basically survive everything, which leads to very fun moments. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, classic power fantasy progression. Step 1, kill some rats. Step 20, don't kill God. In brackets, optional.
So yeah, that's that. Another session coming up is Cyberpunk.
Oh yeah.
Which I'm very excited for, with you and a few other people as my players. And yeah, I think Cyberpunk currently is my favorite campaign that I'm running, just because of everything about it. It's just so fun.
Yeah, I'm a bit scared. Not because...
Yes.
Well...
Niels, tell the people.
Our group decided, we weren't necessarily tasked with this.
We
decided to re-rob the item that we were once tasked to procure, but lost due to bad luck and idiocy. Now we decided to rob a big crime lord of Night City to re-rob that item.
Yeah, that sums it up pretty well, I think.
And yeah, robbing a big crime lord with connections to all the rich folk in the city in Cyberpunk might not be the smartest move. And then something was living in their basically in their computer lab thing, in their server room, or behind the server room, actually. And kind of talked about all stuff that we want to do and did with that person. So yeah, I might have doomed us all, but we'll figure it out. Most definitely, because we are very competent in every way. Yes. We don't fuck up anything. No. We would never. Right?
I mean, the best part is you didn't even talk about that. I made every one of you roll a dice without telling you what that means.
Yeah.
That number is gonna be very important.
Of course. Yeah, but I can't wait. It's just, the thing is, I'm scared for this.
Some of you rolled really shit on that dice.
Yeah, I don't know if I did or if I didn't, but I guess we'll find out on Sunday. And the thing is, I'm super scared, but I'm super excited to see where all of this shit is going, because it's amazing. I love all the other characters and the way you portray the NPCs and the world. It's just amazing. It's just a blast to play every time. And yeah, let's see how we can fuck up Night City this time.
Exactly. And with that, I think we have enough time in this recap and should just jump into episode 125 of DoubleDM podcast, where we talk about complexity and simplicity. Which one is better? Which one should you do? Hey listener, how are you enjoying the show so far? Tell us about it in whatever way you see fit. Go to our social media pages and add us or DM us about your favorite episode of the show. We would love to hear from you on what impact our show might have had on your home games. Or you could review us on your podcast app of choice and leave us a nice message with a 5-star review. And if you want to go above and beyond, bring a friend into the fold. Tell them about our show and refer us to them so they can get a piece of the pie as well. Thank you for listening to DoubleDM and joining us on this incredible journey. So, Niels, a few weeks back, I've told you about this Cave of Punishment puzzle, right, that I designed for my players. And it's inspired this episode's topic. People know what this episode is going to be about. It's about simplicity versus complexity and what simplicity means and why sometimes it's better to go the simple route than the complex route. And sometimes it's better to go the complex route than the simple route. But this puzzle, to lay the groundwork for the people listening and for you, this was basically an endless maze. It was ever-shifting. It was untraversable at first. And basically 5-dimensional.
Okay.
So it was unmappable for my players, and I told them that at the beginning. I gave them those 3 informations. This maze is just untrackable, untraceable. Just go a direction at first. That's gonna be the best option for you. But in this maze, there was a howling wind, and that wind carried screams and exclamations of people, of 4 different types of people. Not four different people, but 4 different types of people. And basically, those were 4 different types of people that are in this maze or were in this maze at some point. Those that came here to escape something, those that came here to want something, those that are currently in this maze being tortured by something, by the torture master, and those that have given up hope in this maze. 4 different types of voices. And yes, there's some overlap between those voices. That's by design. But all 4 had different phrases they would say. That would basically be a characteristic, what they encapture as a voice. For example, those that wanted something wouldn't. Those that wanted something were a lot more determined. Let me through. Where are you?
With a bit more focus.
And those that, for example, were fleeing were a lot more panicked. Where am I? Run. This is not safe. There's a difference in those voices. And if you were able to pick up on that difference and follow one of the voices, you would come to a point where you could find a clue left behind by one of the earlier versions of this voice, basically. Right? It was also in a dream or in a mindscape, so it wasn't that reality focused as a puzzle anyway. So these clues were not necessarily actually left behind by people, but just were there. And those clues were, for example, always go left, never go through doors, never climb up. The funny thing is, before finding the clue, the things that the clues referenced weren't there.
Okay.
Before the clue was found with the water, for example, there was no water. Then the maze reshifted entirely, telling my players that mapping the maze is impossible and you don't need to try. This is not a challenge for you to find the way out. This is for you a challenge to beat this maze at its own game. The maze shifted. Now they had a clue what to do. Follow the water upstream. And they had a choice. Do we do it or do we not do it? Now the follow the water upstream came from a voice that wasn't the voice that wanted what the characters also wanted in this place. Which, if they know that, means we don't need to follow that voice. We don't need to follow the clue because it will not lead us to where we want to go. Right? It's a simple puzzle when you look at it this way, but it's complex in game because as a player, you're following random screams, getting random clues, and have to decide without any prompt what to do with it.
Yeah.
But if you look at it from an outside perspective, which as a GM you always do, it's not necessarily that big of a puzzle, but there are a few turning points, and if you come through to the players, there are different voices. The voices have different clues. You need to find the voice that gives you the clues that you want, or you need to find the voice that wants the same thing as you or something adjacent to it and follow those clues. If you go through those 4 steps, the puzzle seems simple because you just have to find the right voice, follow that, follow the clue, and do it all over again until you come out where you want to come out.
Yeah, but I think a big part in that is context, because even a simple puzzle or a simple thing in general can look complex through the eyes of the consumer just through the context it is presented in.
Yeah.
Because as you said, the puzzle itself, just if you strip it down to the bare things that they had to do, is pretty simple. But in the way that you presented it and the game itself presented it, made it complex just through the context or the way it is displayed.
Yes.
And I think that's something to keep in mind. If you want to create puzzles or situations and want to play with the complexity meter, basically, think about the way you want to or you will present it to your players. And then adjust accordingly.
I think generally the word context is very important. As always, context is important. And you as a game master and as a player have to realize the context you are in. And that is a stacking thing, context, right? Because we can look at the context of this puzzle that I presented. And we can either look at it from the large to small scale or small to large scale. The things in the scale don't change, but there's a difference in looking at it. Because when we start from this big thing, 2 sessions ago, they were sent to a dream realm. That is part of the context of this riddle. They are in a dream or in a mindscape. Nothing here is real, is part of the context. We are being chased by this person's subconscious. This subconscious wants us dead, or at least gone, is also part of the context, but it has nothing to do with the riddle, but it's part of the context. It meant that the players had to make decisions fast. Not because I said there's something behind you, run, but because they knew that they are in a subconscious that doesn't want them there. It's gonna try to get you out. Third, they know that the subconscious can play with everything in it. So the riddle had to be looked at from the point of maybe we are being tricked.
Yeah.
That third thing right now made this riddle so much more complex than it was to my players because they had to at every point think to themselves, what if we're being tricked? If that wouldn't have been there, I think they would have figured out the riddle in 30 minutes, maybe less. But it took them 1 hour and 30 minutes because they were like, fuck, the subconscious is playing with us. What do we do? Do we follow the rules? Do we not follow the rules? Which rules do we follow if we follow only some of them? How do we decide between the rules? Right? The questions were right. Problem were they were looked at from a different perspective than the riddle wanted or that this puzzle would have wanted. And that made the problem way more complex than I anticipated it to be, actually. Now, first things first, right? I've talked about the riddle. My players solved it after the session. While they were a little bit frustrated with the puzzle, they weren't frustrated with me presenting the puzzle, right? They were frustrated with, it took us so long to figure this out. The solution was kind of easy. Shit. And they were also frustrated that they felt like they weren't moving anywhere. But as a GM, I saw them moving. They figured out that these voices are different. They figured out that these voices have different clues attached to them. They figured out that some clues need to be followed while others cannot be followed because some clues were contradicting each other exactly, right? Don't climb up. And the other one was always climb up. You cannot follow both. So they knew that. And I saw them moving, right? But for them, it seemed like they weren't moving at all because the maze didn't change. There was no cue. So what did I do to drop down the complexity, the perceived complexity for my players? I sat them down and said, you guys are moving forward. What do you know? And then they recounted it and then went, okay. And then I said, okay, so what is missing? You're missing a clue. What do you think could help you get that clue? And then we figured out together with me as a game master, giving prompts and ideas, because that is something that you are allowed to do and, in my opinion, should do when the table grinds to a halt. We figured out that some voices want something different than other voices. So we figured out all voices want something, and all voices give us certain clues. And then the question from one of the players came without me prompting anything. Wait, what do we actually want down here? And I was like, you got it. Now you just need to figure out which voice wants the same thing as you, and then you're golden. Then you would only have to do 4 iterations of the puzzle again to get all 4 clues of this voice, and you're done.
Yeah.
And then they figured it out. 30 minutes later, going through it a bit, discussing a bit more in character, they went there, they got there, they finished the maze. easy peasy. The complexity was because of the high amount of context that was weighing down on this puzzle, plus the frustration of not having enough cues to know that you're moving forward, led to them feeling that this puzzle was way more complex than it was.
And I think this is a great way to turn down complexity mid-situation, is you as a GM basically talking out of character, out of everything, just as a person to the players and asking them questions. Just let them recount the information that they have and therefore getting all the information that they have into one place or in one recounting, and therefore get a bigger picture, even though you have the same amount of pixels, basically. But you put them together to create a picture and therefore turn down the complexity, because you don't have to piece everything together from all around, but have it in one place. And just talking about it, like with every creative thing that I usually do, creative dialogue helps. The same thing is with thinking about stuff, creating or solving complex or seemingly complex problems. If you talk about them with a group, you get different aspects or different viewpoints on the same thing or on the same information that everyone has. But now not one person is looking at one piece of information and the other one is looking at a different piece, but all of you are looking at the same piece of at the same pieces of information together, and therefore have a completely different standpoint and viewpoint, and therefore can create a solution for a seemingly complex problem that isn't so as complex as you thought.
General advice from someone that loves puzzles, complex things, ideas, whatever in his games. Hi, that's me. As a game master or as a player, this can come from both sides. Call it timeout, right? At my tables, if someone says, okay, wait, stop, the game stops because they might be having a problem. They might be having thoughts. They need to share something with the table, not with the characters. With the table. One skill that you as a game master and TTRPG player learn anyway is figuring out what is in character and out of character talk. But sometimes it's just easiest to say, okay, wait, out of character, let's discuss. That's grounding. You as a GM can initiate this if you see your players moving in circles, if you see them running up against a brick wall, if you see them doing something that they've tried an hour ago. Ground them. Say, okay, let's stop the game for a minute. Recount to me everything you know. And please recount it as players. And if needed, let them make a checklist. Let them write the stuff down on paper or into a Discord chat. Because that way, everyone has the same information now. And there's so much you get from that single grounding moment of let's recount what you know, because your players, first of all, revert back to factory settings, basically. They can disregard anything else, because if they all agree these are the base rules that we know of for this puzzle, they can from there start again with new ideas. If there are 3 rules, in my example, for example, never walk through doors, always follow the water upstream, always go left. In a puzzle, in a maze, that limits the options you can take to a very small subset of all the options. Meaning that you are walking way more into a directed path than before. And that, for example, can be a cue for one of the players to go, okay, that means if there are still too many options, we need more rules because we need to find only one option. Because there's only one way out, right? So let's find the one way out by finding out more rules.
Yeah.
But that only comes when the players write down, this is what we definitely know. And that grounding helps you. But there is so much more to that. Not just that the players basically set a common ground. They also set a common ground with you on what they know, what they picked up. And that gives you the abilities to, first of all, know what they didn't pick up yet, what you have to make clear again. It gives you the ideas of stuff they misunderstood, which can happen. Misunderstandings happen. No big deal. That's why you do this, so you can clear them up. And it also gives you on what they have picked up. And you can use that information.
Yeah. And one thing that not necessarily just for puzzles, or even if your characters all have the right information or all the information that they theoretically need, but still can't figure it out because they think it is too complex, for example, just having a break and not talking about anything related to that can help as well. Because something that I experienced in through university or something, if I have a problem, for example, in math, and I, for the love of God, can't figure out how to solve this equation, I just leave it for a couple of minutes or even a day or two, and then come back and look at it with a different viewpoint. Just because if you're in the moment and riled up and frustrated because you can't solve this thing, that might inhibit your ability to create or use the things that you have at your disposal to solve solve this seemingly complex solution problem. Just like you said, factory resetting your viewpoint or your mindset on this can help a lot. Just getting at it with fresh eyes. Just talk about, for example, in a TTRPG session with that puzzle, for example. You have all the information, you cleared that up, but are still frustrated because you can't figure out why. Take a 5-minute break, get something to eat, talk about your day, and then just get into it again. Because then you are not as riled up anymore. You're a bit more relaxed, a bit calmed down. And especially, this goes especially for more intense sessions, I think. If you have something very intense happening before that riddle, they're still pumped up about that thing and not completely focused on that riddle or that situation in general. And just giving them some time to breathe, or giving you yourself as well time to breathe, calm down, and then go at it again can work wonders in that regard.
At some point, there's something very fun that I've noticed when I do math, for example, math homework. The longer I sit at it, and especially if you have a certain task on that homework that is time intensive and maybe even, right, it's a mathematical proof that you have to do. It takes time, it takes research, it takes complex thinking and analytical thinking. And the longer I do this, and even if I fail at the first 2 attempts, I failed at the first 2 attempts, and now I've been doing this task for like 3 hours. I wanted to be more complex because I've been investing so much time into it. I couldn't deal with the fact that the simple solution I overlooked is actually the correct one.
Yeah.
Because I've invested so much time, I need this to be complex. I want it to be complex, and that's why I only think in complex ways now. Because the simple solution can't be right. Well, I've been already at this problem for 3 hours. I would have gotten to the simple solution already. Or I would have to. So it can't be the simple solution. So it has to be complex. And that way, basically, it's this snowball effect of complexity, of perceived complexity. The problem isn't that complex, but since you've been doing it for so long, it becomes more complex. At least that's how it feels to me. And that also goes for stuff in TTRPGs and puzzles and situations that I have to deal with. Because the longer I take on solving them, the more I want the solution to be complex, because the time invested should have been worth it. And for the very simple solution, 3 hours investment isn't worth it all of a sudden anymore. And then the frustration sets in.
Yeah.
I have no way to deal with that. And that's why as a GM, because I know this, and now everyone listening knows this too, the best thing to do is to counteract that by always grounding, right? If you realize your players are getting too worked up in complexity, rip the seams apart and tell them, let's ground you. Let's go back a few steps. You're thinking too complex. Tell them if ideas don't make sense. Be upfront, because it doesn't matter. We don't need to think of TTRPGs as the sacrilegious thing where you cannot break immersion, because it fucking isn't. Sometimes just telling your players, hey guys, this idea isn't it. You can try, but we don't have to play out the half hour that you need to do this. I can just tell you it won't work because of this. And then you give a hint, and no big deal. Your players will thank you for it because they didn't invest time and work up complexity again, because now it has to be more complex, because the idea that they just had, the genius idea that they just had didn't work. So it has to be more complex than that genius idea, but it isn't. It's simpler. It's way simpler already.
Yeah, but you mentioned a phrase, this can't be the solution, it is too simple. If you hear that at your tables for any sort of problem that you propose, being it a riddle, being it some sort of roadblock or whatever the fuck.
Be it a role-play challenge, basically, right? Where you tell your players, I don't know, this king is proposing something, or this king has asked you to do this, blah, 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 right? And your players thinking to themselves, we can't just say the truth. That's too simple. That can't be the right answer here.
Exactly.
Let's think of a good lie.
But if you hear this sentence, it can't be this because it is too simple. Interject, please. Because no solution is wrong just because it is too simple. It may be still wrong, but not because it's too simple. And then interject there and talk to your players about why this can't be. Get to the bottom of why they think this can't be it. If they only say, yeah, it can't be because it is too simple, if this is their only reason, ask why they think it is too simple. And go further. Yeah. Or if all of that doesn't help, tell them, why don't you just try it? Because even if it's wrong, but they only got to that because it's too simple, but they still try it because trial and error is a thing in a lot of things because you learn from your mistakes. Basically, every mistake you make is a new experience that you learn. If you try something out and it doesn't work, you get new information, even though it might not necessarily feel like it in the first phase. Because you know, okay, this didn't work. Why didn't it work?
Exactly.
And the reason to that question, why something that you tried didn't work, is never because it is too simple.
Yeah, because it is too simple is when I think of a puzzle or a riddle or anything really, there are certain constraints to it. You can't do this because of this rule that is applied to the riddle. The door is indestructible. When the barbarian says, I smash the door in, that clashes with the rule of the door is indestructible. The barbarian will not be able to do that. And that's the thing. And after that, the players more or less know the barbarian can't smash the door in, so we can't smash the door in. The door is indestructible. They found that rule. And with that rule, they can now try different solutions. Well, because they are limited in their options, but they're not limited to... they are limited by this rule. And that's not necessarily bad. Sometimes we have to introduce rules to the game that limit stuff. Because, right, TTRPGs we're often talking about everything should be possible, blah, 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 blah. Yes, but in other instances, having these limitations is needed because you also want them to arrive at a plausible solution to a problem and not just seduce the dragon. Sure, if the dragon has a thing for humans, yes, the human character might be able to seduce them. But if it's literally stated that this dragon is asexual, then no, your players cannot roll a persuasion check to seduce them. No, they can't. Period.
Just as the game being everything is theoretically possible doesn't mean that everything is for every situation.
Yeah.
Because every situation that you come across in any circumstance, be it TTRPGs, be it live, be it whatever, theoretically you have all the options available to you, but not everything is suited best for this situation. If you want to get to work, you could walk that 5 kilometers, no problem, you could do that. But is it best suited for that? No, you should take the bus or the car or the bike or whatever, right? Because, you have the option to walk, but in this situation, is it as applicable as the other means? The same goes for seemingly complex situations in TTRPGs. Because in TTRPGs, the one limiting factor is your imagination. With the imagination being what it is, mostly, there is a plethora of different things you could try, but not everything is best suited for that specific situation that you're in right now. If you want to go through a door in a building, it is possible to blow up the building and then go wherever you want to go.
Theoretically, yes.
Yeah, but is it the best suited situation to blow up the king's palace just to go into the throne room?
No.
Maybe not. Maybe not. Try opening the door first.
Right? This is obviously a banal example, but you can always apply that to more specific examples at your tables. The thing is just that while, yes, TTRPG is the hobby, is the medium of endless possibilities and no boundaries, blah, 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 blah. There's still a lot of fucking boundaries that we need to actually have fun and an enjoyable experience, right? You don't drop your players into a blank white room that is endless in space and time and whatever and just say, do. No, you still set them into a fantasy world that has its own laws of physics, that has its own people, its own rules, its own countries, its own laws and whatever else. And everything of that is theoretically restricting. But the word restricting here is way too negatively connotated for that. But I think people get what we mean. I don't think we need to explain this more away. I just want to say something. TTRPGs are a complex thing.
Oh, yeah.
We know that. You listening to this is episode 125-26 of DoubleDM. We have made 125 episodes discussing TTRPGs. And they are at the same time a very simple thing because it's just have fun, do whatever you want, but also a very complex thing with big rule books attached or maybe big rule books attached with a lot of social constructs behind it, with a lot of different conditions that need to be met to play and blah, 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 blah. So sometimes my advice for every GM out there, an advice that I need to follow myself more. Do the simple thing instead of the complex thing that you're thinking of.
Why do you have to call me out like this?
Do the simple thing because, first of all, right, as we've said so far, the thing is going to be more complex in play anyway than you looking at it in a dry environment, basically. Looking at it on a piece of paper or in your notes, that thing is easy. It's going to be easy +2 in game. And that's just the thing it is because you have all the answers. You're the GM. You know everything. You're the god of everything. You have every possible period. You have written down everything. You have ideas. And this puzzle was written, or this thing was written by you, the person with the ideas. You have written this thing to be able to be solved by you, not by your players. Maybe you have written it to be also be solved by your players if you know how your players solve these types of things. But you need to get to know them for that.
Yeah.
Even then, your players are still people. They're complex beings. They might have a bad day and don't get the idea that you thought that they would get. They might having completely different ideas than you expected them to, even though they've had different ideas the 6 years you've known them since. There's so many factors that you're not controlling. And that uncontrollability of these factors is literally what complexity means in this instance.
Yeah.
And sometimes the easiest thing for this is if, for example, I have this maze, right? And I've decided the only way to get out of this maze is through a puzzle. That was arguably the more complex solution than the one, you just wander for hours and down here. Now role play as players, please. I will describe the surroundings, but it's basically an endless shape of maze until you find 2 guards standing in front of a fucking door. Yay, you found the entrance. Let's do combat. That's arguably the more simple solution. That's arguably the more boring one. Arguably, it's also the more exciting one, by the way. That depends on the person.
Exactly.
But I will just advise you to not always go for the complex thing. Sometimes the simple thing is all you need. Sometimes the simple monster is better. Sometimes the other thing, the simple thing that you're thinking of right now, that's better because it is simple. Because it will lead to less frustration with the players. And I will say it again, frustration isn't necessarily always bad unless it goes unmanaged and carries on after the fact of the situation where it came up in TTRPGs at least.
Exactly.
You don't have to homebrew every fucking monster. Sometimes your players want to find a classic dragon. Just go with the simple solution of putting a classic dragon at the end of your dungeon. Why the fuck not? It's simple, it's fun, and your players are gonna be engaged by it because it's a dragon in a dungeon.
Yeah, but I have to ask one question regarding simplicity in that regard. Is there a thing as something too simple?
I would say yes, just as much as there's a thing as too complex. 2 ends of a spectrum, and you're gonna be wanting to regulate in that spectrum for yourself. One advice I heard once, I'm gonna come back to your question, but one advice I heard once for prepping a TTRPG session was the 1-2-1 rule. And I've Googled the rule, and the rule is a little bit different from what I've been told. So if you Google it now, you will find something different, but it's a good rule for prepping your games. What we were talking about is when you're playing TTRPGs, make the first thing simple, the last thing simple, and the middle thing can be complex. The 1-2-1 rule. Have something that takes 1 hour at the beginning, have something that takes 2 hours in the middle, and have something that takes 1 hour at the end. 3 different sections, a beginning, middle, and end. And the middle thing is where you will spend most of your session. That can be complex because it can soak up time. And that's what mostly I think about when I prep sessions. How do I start? What happens in the session? How do I end? And how do I start is very clearly defined. It's a recap. It's an introduction to the scene they're currently in, and then this scene they're currently in. Then the big thing, what happens in the session is basically a lot of bullet points of stuff that could happen, that might happen, that are happening, blah, blah, blah. And then how do I end is an amorphous thing of end them with a cliffhanger for this session, end them with a long rest for this session. Those type of things, right? That middle part can be complex. And I think it can be more complex at the beginning and end, especially because when we're starting a session and when we're ending a session, people are getting into the flow of TTRPGs and they're getting out of it, right? If you come home from a long day of work, 8 hours of work or 9 hours of work, and you sit down to play TTRPGs with your friends, it takes you like 20 minutes to get into the flow.
Yeah.
And when you're done at like 10 p.m. in the evening and you look at the clock and there's 50 minutes left in the session, you're like, oh, session is great, but damn, I can't wait to sleep.
Yeah.
Right? You're already out of it a bit. And as a GM, I, first of all, feel the same way. But also, I know that other people are feeling this way. So I do, in fact, make sure that the beginning is a little bit easier and the ending is a little bit easier on my players and myself.
Yeah.
But that middle part is complex. So now back to your question. Is there something as too simple? I think yes, 100%. I can't really think of an example, unfortunately.
I can only think about abstract examples, but
yeah, right.
Nothing specific.
The example is abstract. It's already complex. It's a complex example of something too simple, and that just doesn't work, right?
Yeah,
it defeats the point. It defeats the point. There is something as too simple, because I believe that what we want in TTRPGs is a somewhat challenging experience, and that challenge comes through complexity in some instances.
Yeah,
some instances. So if you think that your game is never challenging your players, actually, you could say that your game is too simple, even though that sounds like an insult to your game, which also isn't the thing that you should be doing. It's a lot. Yes, there is something as too simple, but I think it's way harder to achieve than too complex.
Yeah.
Because I can make something, it's so easy to make something complex. It's so easy to make something way harder than it has to be. But it's very hard to make something way easier than it has to be, personally.
Yeah, I feel that. And I think depending on depending on your table, what is too complex and too simple varies from day to day even, because just of the day your players had or you had, because just the way you approach a TTRPG session. If you're coming from 8 to 9 hours of work, something simpler might be already too complex. Or if you're ready and riled up and prepared for riddles on end, and are just in the zone, something super complex might be simpler than on another day, even though the group and the table stays the same, just because of the day that you've had before. And that's why it's difficult to say what is too simple or too complex, but stating that there is something as too simple and too complex is definitely important, I think. And you as a GM, if you're prepping something, thinking about, is this too complex or too simple, is already a complex task in itself, because there are so many factors to consider what makes something complex that it becomes a complex thing itself.
Yeah.
It's a weird thing.
It's a weird thing.
But if you put a complex riddle, a really, really hard complex riddle in your TTRPG sessions, but have an emotionally or mentally taxing role-play experience beforehand, that might make it even more complex than before. And that's something that you have to think about, or should think about when you want to prepare something like this. If you want to have a super complex thing in your game, make sure that everything else is super simple to find the right balance, because I kind of think about it as a way of a complexity budget, you could say.
Yeah, no, but I feel what you mean.
Because you can have multiple low complexity things and the budget is done. Or you can have multiple no complexity things, but one high complexity situation, and the budget is also done. So that's something that you have to regulate a bit for the fun to persist in the game.
I think coming back to the context thing from the beginning, but context of game. In what regards are we playing this game? And I personally, for me, there are two options to this, personally. Not generally, but these are the two options that how I play TTRPGs. As a hobby to entertain myself, and as a show in an actual play. Those are the two ways I play TTRPGs. And that's the context I need to think about when it comes to designing challenges, for example. Because if I'm playing for a hobby as a way to relieve my stress from work and uni and life, I don't want to be challenged too much. I still want to be challenged. I want complex puzzles sometimes. And I want complex situations that I need to think about. I need to navigate social constructs and whatever. But damn, sometimes it's just easier to just slay a dragon.
Yeah.
It's sometimes simpler, it's sometimes easier. And that's just the thing, right? The complexity budget, to take what Niels just said, basically needs to change depending on what you do.
Exactly.
For example, for the actual plays, I would still say that the complexity budget cannot be too high, Because you have an audience. An audience that is probably, that is in most parts listening more or less casually as entertainment. And when creating an actual play, and this might be a hot take for some people, you are playing for an audience. You're not just playing for yourself. You're playing for yourself first and foremost. Yes, but there is still an audience listening to this. And at least overall, you should ask yourself, is this something an audience would listen to? Still, do what you want to do. I want to put this out. Do what you want to do. Play the way you want to, because you can find an audience for that. But think about a potential audience. For example, if you present a complex puzzle that takes 6 hours to solve, would anyone listen to the players trying random things for 5 episodes?
Exactly.
Personally, that sounds like a fun challenge to do that probably will fail miserably. Yeah. I'm the person that says, watch me do it. And then be the one that says, yeah, no, never do it again, please. I showed that this just doesn't work. Please. That's a context you need to think about, because at the end, we play TTRPGs for different things. Everyone does. And that means everyone wants something different. And that also means that some people want something different from complexity. And that's something that you can talk about in session 0. Hey guys, what is the opinion on puzzles? Are you okay with me being a little bit more challenging when presenting something, and maybe it leading to you guys sitting around a table for an hour thinking to yourselves, what the fuck are we doing? Why aren't we moving forward? What is the solution to this riddle or whatever? Is that okay with you guys? And then someone says, yeah, sure, that's okay with me. And someone else says, yeah, but only if it happens not so often, like once every 10 sessions. And you're like, okay, cool. Let's take that. There will be some riddles that will be very complex. I will warn you guys when they come up, but they will come up. They will be far and few in between, but just so you guys know. And then you manage that complexity budget, basically, and are allowed to create challenges that might be complex, but don't become more complex because of the everything.
Because of the everything, yeah. But overall, in general, think, as we said, think about the context, think about the situation that you're in as a player and as a character, both, and then adjust accordingly. But don't think too hard, because if you yourself overcomplicate things again, that makes it even more complex than it would have been if you just did it.
That overcomplicating thing is very fun. I think every GM that has created a cool puzzle for their players has sat before the problem and sat before it and said, well, that's too easy. Let's make it more complex. And that complexity that you just added destroyed the whole thing. I think that's an experience that many GMs make, not necessarily because you break the puzzle to the point of it being unable to be completed, but because you just added something that made it more complex, which at the table, because at the table something is complex plus 2, it's just extra complex and you didn't need it in first place.
Yeah.
And that's something that you really sometimes just have to realize. You don't have to make it more complex sometimes. Sometimes maybe you can make something complex, but generally just go with the one funny thing that you think of, with the idea that you've read online. It's gonna be complex enough. It's gonna be fun enough.
Exactly.
You don't have to overcomplicate everything because, my players need to be challenged, or I need to make sure that the session runs for 5 hours, so let's make this puzzle harder. Trust me, the simple puzzle is going to take them 2 hours anyway.
Yeah.
You don't have to add an extra hour for that, even though you thought that the hour that you in actual play added would only, in prep you thought that would only add like 10-50 minutes to the puzzle. In play it added an hour. You didn't need it.
Yeah, I think overall, just the more you do, or the more you create complex or simple situations consciously, the more you develop a gut feeling of what works in which situation and what doesn't. And if you then try to overthink it, it just destroys that. So don't be afraid to just do it. Because I think I can only speak for myself, but I think it is for you the same way. When we started, we thought about everything, or tried to think about everything. But the more we mastered games, the more we played the game, or the games that we've played, or whatever, right? The more we just develop a gut feeling, a basically
intuition.
We further our skill and therefore our intuition, and know what works and what doesn't. Even if we are in a completely new group, we have the skill to, or develop the skill to, not necessarily actively analyze, but feel what works and what doesn't, and can adjust accordingly. So, but it took some time. So don't worry if something that you do fails in that regulation of complexity and simplicity. Don't worry about it. It will get better or not. It doesn't fucking matter. We are here to play play a game, right?
Yeah, don't overthink it.
Exactly. But if you overthink you having fun, it kind of defeats the purpose.
It definitely defeats the purpose. So one last thing. And it's basically just a joke. We finished with the episode, in my opinion. DoubleDM, make it simple challenge.
How about...
As a meta joke, right? This podcast, 125 episodes of overthinking TTRPGs. I will be the first to say it. It doesn't fucking matter sometimes. And most of the stuff we said so far in these episodes, it can matter. Sometimes it doesn't. Most of the time it probably doesn't. We're just here to entertain you guys with these fun discussions with you to think about. Don't take our word for everything. And one of the big things is, right, we're only here to have fun. This podcast is a fun project. It's not supposed to be that educational at the end, actually. It's supposed to make you think a bit, yeah, but at the end, the journey is that you get better as a GM through just thinking a bit, but having fun.
Exactly. But that point, in regards to what we just said before that...
Have the people that have overthought TTRPGs for so many episodes tell you it doesn't fucking matter. We know the irony behind it, but I think if you can see the irony with us, then you're exactly where we want you to be.
Perfect.
Don't take the advice we give too seriously, but still think about it. Not because what we say is true, but because what we say brings you to think. And that way, everything we've done is worth it for me.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I couldn't have said it better. So with that, I think we're done.
I think I am done, yes.
So with that, thank you for listening. Hear you on the next one, and bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to this episode of DoubleDM. It appears you liked this one. What we had to say and our advice helped you. Why not show us how we helped you in a rating, or even write a review detailing us how we helped? You can do this on the platform that you are listening on right now. It's just a few clicks, doesn't take long, and helps us out. It gets us out there and our advice into more ears of more people. Thanks again for listening and joining us on this amazing journey. Have a great day, and hear you on the next one. Bye-bye.